Greetings, I'm Karen Colligan, and welcome to the Let's Talk Leadership podcast. Why do I care about leadership? As a founder of People Think, and in my tenure as a leader and consultant, I have certainly seen my share of very good leaders and my share of very bad leaders. And I thought, it'd be great to share the wisdom from the very good leaders, hence the Let's Talk Leadership podcast. You're going to hear from a variety of leaders in a variety of roles who will share their leadership expertise by answering the same exact 6 questions. Each leader is unique in their style and approach, and we want to capture that uniqueness and provide you, the listener, with a diverse way of looking at leadership. So let's get moving and talk to our next leadership guest. In this episode, I am thrilled to be speaking to Charles T. Moses, who is the Dean at the School of Management at the University of San Francisco, which just happens to be my alma mater. I am thrilled to have Charles here, and I can't wait to hear all about his leadership style. So Charles, thank you and welcome, and happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for inviting me, and we're glad to have that USF connection. It's a really wonderful institution, and
yes.
Looking forward to our discussion today.
Yes, the USF is a great institution, that's for sure. So before we even get going, before I even ask you the first question, Charles, just give us a little background. Tell us a little bit about who you are, a snapshot of what your role is at USF, and just a little bit about you, who you are as a leader.
Well, I've been at USF now for a little bit more than 2 years, and I'm in San Francisco, but Karen, I'm from New York City.
All right.
And spent most of my professional life in New York City. I was a journalist and editor for Newsday, New York Newsday, for a number of years. I worked for spent 4 years in the Cuomo administration, Mario Cuomo, working with him, part of his administration. Traveled abroad, lived in Africa for 6 years, and have been in academia now for about 15 years. So it's been quite a journey. I'm the kind of person that I shed my skin every 7 or 8, 9 years and try different things. And I think my career and leadership outlook reflects that.
I guess so. So you think you lived in New York City, you're a journalist, you're in the political realm, then you go to Africa, and now you're in academia. So talk about an adventure. Yeah. I kind of follow my heart. When I sense an opportunity, I go with it. And it's been that case. Of course, this last part of my life, I think, has been the best part of my life because I'm able to bring so much of my previous experiences to it. All that stuff I've done, the public policy and the journalism informs my approach to leadership in academia. So. Oh, absolutely. I'm absolutely sure of that. So this is exciting, especially since you're going to be bringing so many different realms of your background into this, and it's just not one industry. So let's get right into it here. Mm-hmm. And my first question, Charles, is leadership is so personal. It's so unique to each human being, and everybody defines it differently. So when we say the word leadership, everybody thinks, oh, I know what that means. And for yourself, yes. So my question to you is, how do you define leadership?
Leadership for me is being able, a leader, I believe in servant leadership. A good leader to me is someone who puts others in front of his or herself. You think of leadership as someone who can drive people and push them like plow horses. That doesn't work in 2021. Mm-hmm. And it probably didn't work 40 years ago when I started my career. I think a good leader is somebody who can work with other people, who's a good listener, someone who can, by dint of their listening and empathy, networking skills, can be a catalyst for concerted action. And that's what I think. And so I'm in the idea business now. I work with people, and they're very, very smart, all of them. And my students are smart. My faculty is smart. My staff is smart. And so to get the best out of them, I have to be more of someone who can be a catalyst for ideas. You can't lead on every front. You have to allow good leadership, intellect, and energy to emerge. And you're shaping it more than trying to control it. And you learn, I'm involved in a lot of what we call co-production of results. You learn from other people. You're guided by your team. Your students will teach you. Your faculty will teach you. Your staff will teach you. And it behooves, I think, a leader in the environments that I work in to be discerning, to be able to be a good sense for people, what motivates people, and to have a good sense for inflection opportunities where you can move the organization subtly in a different direction. Academia is complex. We have all kinds of different dynamics. We have faculty that have tenure, which is something akin to a lifetime guarantee. Who gets a lifetime guarantee in this world?
Not these days.
Not these days, but faculty has something akin to that. And so you have to work with them. You can't drive faculty. You have to be kind of in the middle of it, but you can't, if it can't revolve all around what you want. I find as you move higher and higher in the ranks, you'll really have to become even more discerning to get the best out of people. And that's the challenge. Also, I think that in 2021, being able to work, to be culturally competent, to be able to work across different groups. We have all these underrepresented groups in history who are now staking out a claim in the marketplace. We have women, we have people of color, we have the LGBTQ community, Latinx community who are coming into the into the forefront. And so being able to be able to work amongst diverse groups and lead them. But also, I think leadership is also often being authentic.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a young executive, as a person of color, if you go into the marketplace, you had to kind of subsume who you were in order to kind of fit into this very rigid mold definition of what it meant to be a leader in those communities. You had to operate in a very, very narrow frame. Now I think there's room for a much more diverse set of skills and abilities and insights. What makes a leader good is authenticity, being able to bring your authentic self to the workplace. And so it's interesting and exciting. At the same time, it's also a challenge because I think many people get tripped up on the cultural competence part.
I agree. And what I think is really interesting about everything that you've just said, it ties back to our opening, Charles, of what you talked about, the head and the heart. Yes. You're leading here. You're talking about servant leadership. You are talking about your heart. You're talking about being empathetic. You're talking about being culturally aware. You're talking about bringing people with you, learning from your students. And, we're all smart and we all have certain competencies. And if we don't pay attention to our heart, I always say, just go home. And it all leads back to that.
Yeah. And it keeps evolving. New leaders will emerge. I had the pleasure earlier in my career working with a very charismatic, a guy like Mario Cuomo, wonderful, wonderful speaker, public speaker, very charismatic, ran a big state, was at one point considered to be a contender for the presidency of the United States. And I really liked him, but he was also very, very proud of his ethnic heritage. He'll tell you in a minute that his parents came to Ellis Island and they couldn't speak English, and then set up, a little corner store out in Queens, and that's how he got his start. Well, my story is a little bit different. My parents didn't come to the United States from Ellis Island. They were here when Ellis Island was set up. My ancestors, and they came here as slaves. And they had a little bit more of a torturous journey getting me to where I am. In that sense, I guess you call me a Johnny come lately. They paid for my bus ticket long before I came on the scene. And from those experiences, I think it's given me a perspective. I mean, I'm a striver. I'm a strong believer in education. In my heart, I always want to work with aspirant groups. New York has always been, Karen, as you know, a melting pot. You have aspirant groups who come here, and they set up in places like Queens and Brooklyn, and they have dreams and they pursue those dreams. And New York can accommodate that. And we have a wonderful public education system to support that. I was a product of that system, and wonderful exposure, the best libraries, the best art, the best culture, the best museums, you name it, you could partake of that. So I was the prince of the city in that regard. I made sure that, I got around and saw and learned as much as I could. Also, I think that New York is a great place to learn how to rub shoulders with people not like yourself, different cultures, and learning about other cultures and who they are, and seeing how you fit in. and to the world, and exposing yourself to being uncomfortable at times. And to the extent that you can grow up in a place like that and be part of an affluent community and understand the kind of continuity of life where your grandparents and your parents and you go out and you take your place in public life. It's been a good journey for me.
Yeah.
And as I said, the higher education part is the best part because I get to bring all those previous experiences to what I do now.
Right. And you've stood on other people's shoulders, and
Absolutely.
Now you're letting people stand on your shoulders. And that's the way leadership is. That absolutely is. Yep.
You don't want to fall in love with yourself or fall in love with your legacy. You have to live in your time, influence who you can influence. And when your playing days are over, you become a teacher, you can help other people. I believe in that. I oftentimes ask myself why people who are great actors and do great things out here in the world, why when their playing days are over, why don't they become teachers? I think we have to have a certain ego set up to allow you to do that, but that's another story.
Yeah, we'll get into that another podcast.
Yeah.
All right. So second question, it's about values. I mean, if you think about values, Charles, they're our guiding light. They're our North Star. It's how we make decisions. It's how we navigate. So what are your 3 top values for you?
I like honesty. I like humility and perseverance. Perseverance. Not too many of us, Karen, are born to the manor. Most of us have to, have some struggles. Perseverance, I think, is what the value that comes into play when you look out at the world and you find that things are not to your liking. There are injustices in the world. What do you do about those injustices? Right. Do you fold up your tent? Do you get angry? Do you become a bomb thrower? Or do you resolve that you're going to find some domain or some way to work on changing the things that you can change? There are plenty of things, we have plenty of challenges in the world, as you know. Big things. If you want, you can work on the environment. If you want to work on race relations in America, if you want to work on healthcare, you work on criminal justice. If you want to make the capitalism system more inclusive and close the income gap and deal with some of those issues, if you want to make sure more people have access to the system, you can participate productively in the system. There's all those things you can work on. Perseverance is what I think helps to get you there. The idea that the world is not going to, the painting that you see, the tapestry that you see out here in this world is not going to be to your liking all the time. And you've got to pick an area where you can make a difference. That's honesty to me is related to another thing, another value is kind of a sub-value is facts. Facts are important in this world. And I think, and I think people are out here now and they're spinning and they're tap dancing and they are leaders who are not honest and who are just solely interested in their own self-interest or continuity, and they don't think very much about the impact of how they influence people. I think honesty is very, very important, very important value. So, having been a journalist, I always developed early on in my life an appreciation for facts and how facts can help people to become better informed and take better action. And I think our society, facts have become subsumed. Yes. Beneath, I don't know what you'd call it, but self-interest. I think honesty is still important. And I wish we had more of it.
Well, I was just going to say, why don't you go back into the publishing world? Perhaps that would help a little and give us some of those facts, Charles.
When I was a younger man, we had great statespersons, and I keep thinking some Jacob Javits and some of the others. These are not Republicans or Democrats. These are people who cared about the country and they told the truth, and the chips fall where they may. I love Jimmy Carter for that. He's 98 years old now and he's a post-president, but he's been very influential. I think he's written like 28 books or something like that. It's amazing, yeah. And, he always says, God moves my hand. He doesn't get pushed around by whimsy. He follows his own course, and I think that's important. But I think that having truth and honesty, and understanding facts, at the core of what one does as a leader, I think is very important. I work with really, really smart people. I'm not going to fool them. Right. And so transparency is in my self-interest, and so It's something that I've cultivated over my career, and something I have to use almost every day in the work that I do.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
And I forget the second one. What was the second one we said?
Humility.
Humility. Oh, humility. Yeah. Well, humility is important because if you think of the leaders who I like the most, they're people who I think, had that quality. I'm just thinking about General Powell, who passed away, Colin Powell, wonderful man. I was in New York as a journalist in New York, and we were having a big gathering of journalists in the city. And it was a week, I think 2 or 3 days after he had been named chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And we had some of our members had some contact with some of his people. And we got General Powell to come to our convention and give a keynote speech.
Wow.
And I was just struck by, here's a guy who's, got enormous responsibility, life and death responsibility for a bunch of people. And he came in and was such a humble guy, very modest and humble and glad to be there and spent a lot of time. And I said, this guy's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. And he took a lot of time. Similarly, I met Nelson Mandela, first as a freed political prisoner, and then as president of South Africa. He came to New York. And I got a chance to be in a meeting with him and Governor Cuomo. And it was just the three of us in this meeting.
Wow. Were you the referee?
Well, I was the instigator of the meeting. And I got to tell you, I was just so impressed with him because of the enormous responsibility that he carried most of his life. And just a nice guy and really easy to talk to and very, very, very insightful. So I always wanted to cultivate that humility. Leadership, I think, is not bestowed. It's something that you earn. And I think that, we have people who expropriate the title leader, but I think the organic designation of a leader is someone who I think is humble and willing to engage and is first and foremost empathetic and discerning when it comes to other people. So,
Yes. Wow. Great. Thank you. All righty. So the third question, Charles, here is, we're going through an enormous amount of transition and change. I mean, you've alluded to it already, the global pandemic, the social awakening, the the economic implications of the two of them alone. And then so the thought becomes transition will always be happening. So how do you lead through transition and change?
I don't think you lead. I don't think the leader has to have the answer, Karen. I think the leader has to have access to the networks through which answers can emerge. And I think there's some people that it's not my theory, but I think it's referred to as leader as host as opposed to leader as hero.
Yes.
A leader doesn't have to stand in the crosshairs all the time and beat their chest and proclaim how much they know and how little everyone else knows. There's tremendous expertise out here in the world. And I find that sometimes in the world, we tend to go to the same suspects all the time for all the solutions. And there's a whole host of other people out there who we could go to, community-based folks, people who are working on some of the most pressing issues of our time. I'm in San Francisco, and it's a wonderful, stunning city. I mean, the most beautiful place you'd ever want to live in the world, but we're dystopian. Safeway has talking about having to reduce its hours near my house because there's so much shoplifting going on. And we have homeless people, whole encampments. They just camp out anywhere and no one seems to know what to do about them.
Yes.
And so I guess for me, you can't have the answer to all these questions, but certainly you have access to the networks and being able to facilitate the engagement and involvement of we have an enormous capacity in our country to sideline people for different reasons: race, gender, sexual orientation, didn't go to the right school, you're not an expert, you're not on CNN every night, so you're not somebody, we don't talk to you. And I think there's some solutions by just engaging more people meaningfully in the discourse. There's some solutions there. And so I'm a big believer in reaching out, not having the answers, trying to put together the networks, being a catalyst. I don't have to be the hero. I can create the networks and the pathways, for co-production or multimodal production of really, really, really significant solutions. But today's solution is tomorrow's dud. You got to start all over again tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
We have complex issues. I mean,
Yes.
what are we going to do about the environment? It impacts us all.
Yes.
We can't agree. We can't get agreement on it. Maybe take it out of the hands of the politicians.
Well, there's a good idea.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to make a comment, though, about everything that you just talked about in terms of leader as host versus hero, about bringing the community together, and that a leader should be a catalyst during these times, and that engage with more people and reach out. And all that goes back to the leader being able to swallow his or her ego and allow humility to rise to the top and not have to know everything, Charles, because everybody's human, and the more people together, the more ideas, the more friction, the more ideas, the more friction, and that's how we stimulate new things occurring. So
the sad thing I look at, one of the things that I'm thinking about the pandemic a lot, and what changes that has wrought on us. So out here in San Francisco, people can organize their life. San Francisco is not very diverse in terms of people of color. I mean, most of them people of color. Many people of color don't live in the city. They live in other parts of the city. It's very expensive here, kind of like living in Manhattan.
Right.
Anyway, I'm thinking, how do you could end up, if you're unfortunate enough to get COVID, you can end up in an intensive care ward someplace in the city, in a hospital, $15,000, $20,000 a day on a respirator with somebody who your roommate in that ICU room might be someone who was homeless on the street.
Mm-hmm.
So what it points up to me, and this is kind of part of the Jesuit principles, they'll tell you about this, is kind of care. They call it cura personalis, care for the person, the whole person. We're in this together. Lose the old biblical, thing, phrases, I am my brother or my sister's keeper. And, we're in this together. And sometimes we're able to organize, in places like San Francisco, we're able to organize our lives in ways that you would never think that we had to rub shoulders with anybody who's not like ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But yet we find that now the least of us, the homeless person, the ex-con, the person who's suffering from AIDS or some other disease, we have to take care of them because they're part of our community. And so building a sense of connectedness to other people, I think is really, really important byproduct of leadership. Bringing people together.
Yes.
Trying to break down some of these old shibboleths that said, I'm better than you because I went to school and you didn't, or whatever. Right. And I think that's a big part of leadership. And I try to talk to my students about it. I mean, they'll tell you, the young folks will tell you, it's important. We're part of a global community, and we have to be, we're all interconnected, and we have to find meaningful ways to express that.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. All righty. So the fourth question, Charles, is, we know the best leaders are curious and they're always learning. And obviously with your career trajectory, we see that that's an important element for you. Yeah. So what other tools and resources have you used to make sure that you are continually stretching and growing and developing?
Well, I think my natural instinct in life is every 10 or 15 years, I shed my skin. And I mean, shedding my skin. I love that. I go through a professional metamorphosis, and I tell you what happens, Karen, as I move along, I get less concerned. Not that I'm rich, I'm a working man, but I get less concerned about money and more concerned about opportunities to give fuller expression to my whole being. I don't think I'm done. I think there's other frontiers ahead. As you move along, you have to find deeper ways to bring your whole being to what it is that you do. Academia gives me a lot of avenues, to express, and to lead and support and help others. But I think there may be some other frontiers out there as well. So I'll continue to grow. I continue to learn, both informally and formally. As an academic leader, we almost all the higher education institutions are concerned now starting to focus on, if you look at the demographics in the United States and elsewhere, the number of so quote unquote traditional college age students is declining. I mean, what you have is other groups, older people who are going to be continuing to go back and forth between academia and the work world, some of
Mhm.
them for degrees, but most of them for additional training or deeper training or enrichment training, in maybe just training that, in fulfillment of some interest that they may have. So lifelong learning, I think, has become the thing. It will continue to be a thing. And I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a big believer in that. I'm always looking for new things to learn. And I think one of the blessings of living in our era is that there's so much information that's available at your fingertips. You don't have to go to the library. The library can come to you now. And there's so
Yes,
much information
exactly.
that's available. So I have a Kindle. I think my Kindle is about to blow up because I have so much on it. But I enjoy reading, and I enjoy using podcasts and other tools that are available. All the online tools, social media tools, a good, very good, very very good way to learn. I was in Manhattan, I guess about when we met about 8 weeks ago,
Yes.
and I was struck by. I used to be a big newsstand person. I used to love to go to the newsstand and pick up all the papers. And I'd be out there on Saturday afternoon, I think at 6 to get the Sunday paper.
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't find one. And I was a little bit dismayed. But I'm a big believer in, reading. And of course, now you have access to the world's newspapers, the world's news, the world's information. And so I make sure that I'm a very, very, and I've always been very, very heavy partaker of information.
Well, I guess as a journalist, that would certainly make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And you have the ability to, if you're curious about something, as you're reading a Kindle, you can actually click on a word and it'll tell you the whole history of that word. And so you can get all kinds of information. And so I just think it's wonderful. I mean, and I think that we live in an era where you can, if you have an interest, you can simulate, you can learn things that, you don't have to go someplace to do something. You can learn all kinds of online simulation experiences.
Yes.
Wonderful math teachers online. And so young people have access to all these tools. This is one old professor who's right up there with the kids, learning,
Nice.
right in there with them, learning as much as I can.
Nice. Mm-hmm. And let us not forget about the human interaction, like having a conversation like this. I mean, it's great. I mean, to me, I through this whole Let's Talk Leadership podcast series, I can't tell you how much I've learned. I think I'm a student of leadership, and then I find out, wow, maybe, I got more to learn, more. And like you, I love your quote, you're a lifelong learner and you're not done yet. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
And there's so much to know. And the challenge in my field, Karen, is also that, knowledge is turning over very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So, by the time, the old textbooks that we used to use, takes 2 or 3, 4 years to get them published. By the time they're published, they're already obsolete, if not, And so now we're using really what I would call more organic materials to support education, to support learning. And those are a lot more, you can update them, a lot more dynamic. And I find that very exciting too.
Yes. And it's good it'll keep the students interested. And that's what obviously we need to do.
Yeah.
So speaking of the development, tell me about what do you do and how do you give the people that you work with development and growth opportunities? Like what do you do for them?
I'm going through that right now. Every year in my role now as the dean, I have to evaluate 60, 70 people. And we do it along 3 lines. It's traditional academic institutions. So we look at them in terms of their teaching. We evaluate their service, because service is a big part of the university. And also we evaluate their scholarship as their intellectual contributions. And so, but the opportunity, it's really the opportunity for them to tell us what they're doing with their agenda and how we can support their agenda. So if they're a young faculty member, they're just getting started in their career, they may need access to conferences and other types of, so they can inject themselves in their professional field. They have networks, and it could be conference networks, it could be other networks. And so they need to get out there in those networks, you need resources. And so I'm a resource provider. They tell me what they need. I make sure they have that. If they're an older or more mature faculty member, they're somewhat established, or if not very established in their field, they may need resources already. But the difference with them is we make sure that they're producing intellectual, and some of them very primary intellectual products and the like. So we support that by making sure that we publicize them. My whole business is about ideas and about people.
Right.
So, I make sure I promote the ideas. So they're producing books or articles or research that's very important. I have one faculty member who has an index. It's a venture capital index. People down in Silicon Valley, people in the venture capital world value it. So that index he created himself. So it behooves me to make sure that people get the word about this index and how important it is. And I think he publishes it annually. And so it's very important. I have other faculty members another faculty member who is an emerging expert in autonomous vehicles policy.
Wow.
And so he is going to be doing a conference on Friday I'm going to be speaking at. And so it behooves me to make sure that the world knows what he's doing.
Yes.
And so again, we have these people who are doing these really interesting things and scholarly activities. So part of my job is to make sure that the world knows about them, whether they're an emerging scholar or an established scholar. And I enjoy that.
Yeah, I bet.
And it cuts across a lot of, many disciplines. I'm not expert in all of them. But it's fun. It's fun to see them, to become experts. Another one of my faculty members is writing op-eds, writes a lot of op-eds. And so those have been published and for interesting work. We're talking about work-life balance. And so she's an expert, kind of the emerging expert in that field. Single, she's also a mom and she has young kids. So she's trying to balance.
Figure it all out. Yeah.
Figure it all out. And so she's doing, so getting that information out to the world is important. So we have a marketing team and we still spend a fair amount of money every year, every annually on making sure that we market all of their achievements and accomplishments.
Nice. And what I love about that, Charles, is that you are really asking them, what do they need to develop and how can you as the dean and as the academic institution support them in that growth? Because everybody has to take ownership for what they want. I mean, you can help them and you can guide them and you can, coach them. And at the end of the day, they have to be very clear about what they want. So, that's really great.
And you see it in another dimension too. And I think there's, the whole contract between workers and their employers is going through a metamorphosis right now.
Yes.
People are not willing to go into to be driven. For instance, in the Bay Area, you have a single mom making $60,000 a year who has to get up every day and take the train or drive into town. You spend $35,000 just on the commuting costs. And so people are not willing to do that anymore. So employers are having to adjust at the terms of work, but also people want to be honored for what they bring to the workplace.
Absolutely.
Got to find a way to shift the thinking from driving people as if they were plow horses to really collaborating with them on the co-production of what it is that you're about, your company's about. And it's a shift. It's a mind shift. And I think people learned during the pandemic that maybe it's more important to be home with my kids and my loved ones than it is to be spending half my time commuting to a job. And so the smart employers are having to make that shift. And you see it happening where the conditions of work are really, I think, improving in many respects. And people are moving from jobs that, perhaps are less people friendly to those that are. I see it in the Bay Area and I see it around the country and around the world.
Yeah. Oh, it's all over. And it is that co-production. It's the collaboration. It's the ask, don't tell environment that employees are now requesting and demanding, and we'll see where it goes. It's in an evolution. I'll say it was a revolution. Now it's an evolution, and we'll just see where it brings us.
But that couples with when we were talking about earlier that people can get information, they can learn skills on their own in many different ways. So a college degree, and I'm a dean, is not necessarily the coin of the realm that it once was, because the skills that we can offer can be taught in other places. Some companies say that we can grow our own ideal employee. And so again, we're having to adjust and really become a lot more agile in the way that we work with all of our stakeholders, our students, our faculty, and our staff.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So last, and of course not least, what piece of art or music or literature or whatever else keeps you balanced and brings you joy? And joy is really the operative word here. So what brings you joy so you can show up at work, Charles, and do all the things that we've just been chatting about?
I love good music. I love hearing music. And
what kind of music? What kind of music?
I love jazz. I love jazz. Last weekend, it was Branford Marsalis.
Sweet.
SSF Jazz here in San Francisco. Wonderful institution here. And about a month ago, it was Pat Metheny. And, so just about every weekend, or maybe sometimes it's twice a week, I'm out listening to some good music. I'm so happy that we can be out and about because I love live music, But I also I love the arts. I love theater. I wish if I was back east now, I'd be going up to Juilliard and going to jazz at Lincoln Center, or getting around town to some of the jazz spots, and going to the museum. And it's as New York City is a great place for that. So but there's great culture out here as well. And
yes, there is.
I'll be out and about and enjoying it like everybody else. But music inspires me. One of my favorite. This is I guess it's like a ringer, but I'm a big Miles Davis fan, and so as you probably didn't notice, or maybe you do, the biggest selling jazz record of all time is his "Kind of Blue," and so I love to listen to that song, that record, and that recording, and so I have a lot of digital music, on my iPhone and in my house, and really enjoy music. Music inspires me. So
nice. Yeah. Good. I love it.
Yeah.
Wow. Whoa. So Charles, I can't thank you enough. What a great conversation. We could be here for another hour, I'm sure. It's just so nice to hear. What I loved about our conversation is how you've navigated through your life doing different things, but still bringing it all back to the basics: co-production, collaboration. I'm not here to tell you, I am here to help you and take your hand and bring you with me. And that's the theme of what you have said to us, Charles. So that's really great.
Yeah. Well, the world is, more complex, and the problems are more we problems and not me problems. We share the burdens. Yes. And COVID should have shown us that we share the burdens of life.
Yes.
And so we have to have concern for others, just as we have concern for ourselves, and we have to find a way to operationalize that. So outlet selfishness.
All right. I'm in.
Me and more we.
I like we. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yep.
So thanks everyone for listening. And I'm Karen Colligan, and you've been listening to Charles T. Moses, who is the Dean at the School of Management at the University of San Francisco. If this leadership podcast was of interest to you, go to the peoplethink.biz website and look at all the other distinguished leaders I've had the pleasure of interviewing. You'll learn so much about the uniqueness of leadership, because I know I have. And don't forget to share with your colleagues. Till the next episode of the Let's Talk Leadership podcast, have a good one. And don't forget to keep it real.